And we're here today, 18th August 2020, session 1 of counter sushi harvesting in Alma and how that is reflected in Alma Analytics. And Noam, I'm changing your role now to host. Take it away.
Thank you very much, Yoel. Let me see if I can start sharing my screen and then you'll see the presentation with your permission. I don't see, let me see, share. Yoel, I do not have an option to share my screen. I only have the option to share content. Let's see now. Perfect, something's happening. I think it's okay. I am starting to share my screen and I'll set off the presentation. Okay, now that everything is connected, hi everyone, my name is Noam Fass. I am the product manager for acquisitions. As Yoel just explained to us, we are going to talk today about Counter Release 5 in Alma and Alma Analytics. What we are going to see today essentially is an end-to-end workflow. If I, as an institution, would like to work with a vendor and have automatic sushi harvesting of usage data, we'll see how to configure a Sushi account in Alma. We're going to talk a bit about Sushi, see how our user group are helping us with the ongoing development of Sushi. We're going to see the different features which are available for a Sushi account, like setting an account, testing it, manual or automatic harvesting. We're going to take a quick look on the job analysis, the job that automatically harvests the data. And we're going to see the screen which allows institutions to oversight and overview of the loaded and harvested files. And then Yoel at the mid-end this session will show us how to analyze the data using analytics. Okay, so let's, without further ado, let's continue. A bit about Sushi. I'm sure that most of you are familiar with the standardized usage statistic harvesting initiative, which is set to help institutions to easily harvest usage data from their vendors or from their providers. Essentially, in Alma, there is a process which does this automatically, meaning that once you configure a Sushi account in Alma, you have the option to set a scheduled job to go to the vendor website and fetch the usage data information for the specific platform you would like to get the usage data from. In order to assist our institution, we compiled a certified Sushi vendor list, which I'm going to explain further down the presentation. But this certified Sushi vendor list is a list of vendors URL, which we know that were tested successfully and harvested successfully for usage data. So when you come and you want to configure a Sushi account in Alma in order to automatically harvest usage data, you'll have the option to browse the list of certified Sushi vendors and see if the vendor you would like to configure is already or was already tested successfully, and you can configure it more efficiently. We're going to see it further down the presentation. A little bit about the community usage. So in order to see how the community are using this Sushi functionality, since we invested a lot of effort in developing the Counter 5, especially functionality, we took the liberty of looking, of course, anonymized data. We took the liberty to look at the number of collections which are currently in all of Alma institutions and has a platform parameter. This is essentially the potential of collections which can be harvested from usage data. And we've seen that from 270,000 collections which are activated throughout the institutions of Alma, we've seen that 70,000 are actually using the option to do Sushi harvesting, which is great. It's a good number, it's 25%. But what we've seen is that it's only quarter, and we want to help you as users, be more efficient. Automatically harvesting data can really save you some time from either going to the vendor website and fetching it yourself, or not doing it at all and not being aware of the usage data. So this is a very big and wide spectrum of usage that we analyzed. We've seen that from March to July, there was an increase of usage of Sushi data, of Sushi harvesting, sorry. but we would like to encourage you to define Sushi account, and this is why we are making this session. And shortly, I'll show you how to configure a Sushi account. But before I will show it to you, I just want to tell you that we have Dara, which is the recommender assistant in Alma that also identified these collections which are in your institution and were not yet configured with a Sushi account. So Dara knows to identify this, and Dara also offers you the option to create a Sushi account. So we recommend you to take a look at Dara, see if she recommends you to help you, if she recommends you, sorry, to set a Sushi account for a certain vendor, and really utilize Dara, because Dara can help you best utilize the system. Let's move on and explain a bit about the user group. The user group essentially was established in late 2019 in order for Ex Libris to successfully configure or build the support for Counter 5 in Alma. This group is essentially was built in 2019 to help us do the Counter 5 project, but it's an ongoing discussion in this group. It's not something that we did and now we stopped. This is something that we're ongoing. We're listening to our community. We're listening to our users. We're getting a lot of feedback from them regarding elements that we need to be improved, or elements that are not working well, or elements that are not connecting well with vendors. Essentially now when we are stable with Sushi Counter 5, the group really tells us that this or that vendor are not working correctly with Alma. We are doing the analysis, we're contacting the vendor, and we're telling the vendor that they need to go through the standard in order to successfully communicate with Alma. So this is the time to say thank you for all these institutions who are participating in the group. If any of you on the call would like to take part in this group, please feel free to contact me and or Yoel, and we'll be happy to add you to this group. Special thank you to Harvard that gave us the credentials to do the demo for this session. Okay, let's move on to the interesting part of setting an account. Before I'll show you a live system demo, I'll give you a short explanation about setting a Sushi account. In Alma, there's the option to set a Sushi account for either release 4 or release 5. As we all know, officially, Counter 5 is the one who is currently in the market. But since there are some vendors who are not yet or had not yet moved to Counter 5, Alma still continues the support for Counter 4. But once either vendors or us decide that Counter 4 is obsolete, it will be deprecated. But for now, we do support the option to configure either Counter 4 or Counter 5. And of course, Alma can simultaneously harvest from vendors either Counter 4 or Counter Release 5. I'm going to show it as well in the demo, which I'm going to show in a second. So this is an example of the user interface of a certain vendor, Edward Elgar, which I'm going to show in the demo. This is the vendor details as if I did the edit vendor, and then I went to the usage data tab, as you can see highlighted in red. Once I'm in this usage data tab, I can configure whether I want to add a Sushi account for Counter Release 4 or Counter Release 5. As we can see here, this specific Sushi accounts were configured for Counter Release 4, but when the time came, also Counter Release 5 Sushi accounts were configured. The major difference between Counter Release 4 and Counter Release 5 is the option to configure multiple report types for a single Sushi account. So if for Counter 4 or Counter Release 4, we needed to configure specific report type for each specific report type for each Counter Release 4, now we have the option for a single Sushi account to configure multiple report types. Now your question may be, why do we have two Sushi accounts for R5 if Noam just stated that I only need one? So that is a good question. As we can see, this specific vendor requires platform parameter. So a platform parameter is the vendor's requirement in order to understand from which platform the usage data needs to come from. So as we can see here, we configured two Sushi accounts, one for platform Edgar Online, and the second one for an additional platform. We see that the Edward Online has PR and PR1, and also the second platform, Advanced Introduction, also has PR and PR1. So essentially, there's only a need to configure a single Sushi account for multiple report types. But if you have a platform parameter for a specific Sushi account, you'll need to configure another Sushi account in case you want to have another platform harvest usage from another platform from a specific vendor. As we can see in this example, all the harvesting from the R4 Sushi accounts were disabled for this institution, since the information is already coming from R5. My assumption is that in the near future, we'll be able to also, or the institution will delete the Sushi accounts for the R4. Of course, the usage data will remain and will not be deleted when the Sushi account is. This is a bit about the platform. Let's move on to the part once I'll configure the initial Sushi account. We have an indication on the Sushi account itself that this is either Sushi release 4 or release 5. For our example, it is release 5. And this is the UI. This is the page where one configures a Sushi account. We'll go over the elements here now, I will say briefly, and then I'll show it to you in the real interface. The first thing that is interesting for you as an institution who configures a Sushi account is this Sushi account certified Sushi vendor list. As I stated before, in Alma, when a Sushi account is configured and tested and harvested successfully, either Ex Libris or the institution can put or place this Sushi account as certified Sushi vendor. As a certified Sushi vendor, the URL for the vendor is stored in Alma, and institutions who configures a Sushi account has the option to search for something that is already stored, tested, and harvested successfully. So there's an option to go to the list and take a look on the list to see whether the vendor you are working with is already a certified Sushi vendor. In case the vendor is not certified Sushi vendor and you're configuring a new account for a new vendor, you have the option to contribute the vendor URL in order for other institutions to use it after you, of course, configured it and harvested information and usage data successfully. So the button of contribution is placed on the right-hand side of the screen. Please use it. Please contribute. Let's help the community do or configure successfully the Sushi accounts while using the certified Sushi vendors. This is a growing list. We already have almost 100 certified Sushi vendor for release 5. We have a bit more for release 4. So this is something that is ongoing, and as further down the road, I believe when more vendors will join the counter release 5, the certified Sushi vendor list will keep on growing. Let's continue to the next section of the screen, which is the request details. The request details section holds multiple fields. From my experience, or from our experience, most vendors require either requester ID, customer ID, and for sure they will need an API key. This is for counter 5. It's a mandatory parameter, the API key. Without this parameter, the connection to the vendor will not be successful. It's the key that will allow the vendor to identify your institution, as well as the customer ID and or the requester ID. Each vendor has their own requirements. So when you configure a Sushi account, the first thing you will need to do is go to the vendor and make an inquiry and ask the vendor, what is my API key in order to communicate with you during a Sushi process? And what are the credentials I need to provide you? Do I need to provide you with a customer ID, requester ID, maybe email? Something that is very important is the platform parameter. It's not mandatory for all vendors, but for some vendors, and of course the vendor which I'm going to show shortly in the demo, it is mandatory to place a platform parameter in order for the vendor to understand from which platform you would like to retrieve the data from. Some vendors know to ignore this parameter and provide you the information from all their supported platform, but others require a specific platform parameter. So this is important that I'm stating it because you need to understand that when you configure a Sushi account, it's not exact science, and you need to understand from the specific vendor you're trying to configure what is the information that the vendor requires. And Alma essentially has all the available fields to offer for you to populate, but the vendor needs to decide, or the vendor knows which information they require. Adding report type. As explained in the previous slide, in Counter 5, there's the option to add multiple report types and not a single report type. So of course we're going to show it in the demo, but adding multiple report types is a time saver for institutions who essentially only need to configure a single Sushi account and have the option to harvest multiple report types. The last element, which I'm going to explain on this slide, is the test connection. So when an institution enters or contacts the vendor, gets their API key, gets their customer ID, understands if they need the platform parameter or not, once they set this, the institution has the option to test connection, meaning it's a call that goes to the vendor website, places the credentials, and just make sure that they get a response back. That the vendor says, okay, you are connected, this is true, you're okay to continue configuring the Sushi account. So we're going to show it in the demo how to test the connection to make sure that we are connected to the vendor correctly. So I think now is the best time for me to stop the actual presentation and go to the live environment of Alma. If you will... Yes, Yoel, please.
Let's see if anybody's got any questions or comments at this stage. If you do have a question or comment, send it in the chat, or just unmute yourself and ask. Anybody have anything? Questions, comments for Noam, for anybody? Okay, let's do a sound check then. Nobody has a question or comment. 64 people, so let's just make sure everyone's still with us. Just send in a chat and say, yes, we hear you fine. Okay, people are raising their hands that they hear us. Okay, Noam, so they're all here and don't have a question, so go on. Sorry for the interruption.
Thank you, Yoel. Thanks. Keep on interrupting whenever you think it's needed. Okay, so thank you everyone for responding to Yoel's requirement. Let's go over and try to set a Sushi account. So in Alma, as you can see, I'm working with the new interface of Alma. Nothing really new in terms of functionality. Of course, it's an improved user interface, but you can do whatever you did before. So let's try and look for Edward Elgar, which is the vendor that I would like to work on. And of course, I didn't find it. I wonder why. Let's try and see if I need to find the full name. Okay, so I found the vendor that I already have configured, the vendor that I'm creating orders from, and now I would like to edit the vendor and add a Sushi account. So as we've seen, we need to go to the usage data tab. Looking at the tab, I know that nothing is configured since I have nothing folded in the corner. I'll click on the usage data and I'll get to the usage data screen. Looking at the presentation, the next thing that I'll need to do is to add a Sushi account. Now is the time for me to decide whether I would like to work with counter release 4 or counter release 5. The assumption that I've discussed with my vendor, and I know that this vendor is working with counter release 5. So I'll go ahead and click on the counter release 5 and open the Sushi account page. This is the same page that we've just seen in the presentation. And the next thing that we've seen is that we are working on counter release 5 in the summary section positioned on the top panel on the screen. Moving on to the next element are the identifiers. Let's configure the Sushi account. What we will need to do now is to configure a URL for the vendor. First thing we can do is get the URL from the vendor, but the best thing to do is to look and see whether someone else from the community or Ex Libris had already configured this vendor in the certified Sushi vendor list. So I'm going to click to open the certified Sushi vendor list. Now, like as stated, this list holds both counter release 4 and counter release 5 certified Sushi vendors. Due to the fact that I'm currently configuring a counter release 5 Sushi vendor, the list that I'm seeing now are only counter release 5 vendors. What I'm going to do is search from the 124 certified Sushi vendors. I'm going to try and search Edward. Hopefully I'll find it. Edward. Let's see that I managed to find it. Perfect. I found this. I see that I have special instruction that for successful harvest, Edward Elgar Publishing requires a platform parameter. This is good. Now I'm aware that I'll need to enter a platform parameter to make sure that everything works as expected. My assumption is that I got this information from the vendor when I spoke to him, but there are special instructions in the certified Sushi vendors as well. Just a side note here, there is also an online help page in Alma which specifies all the certified Sushi vendors and the special instructions together with the supported platform codes that you will need to enter when you configure the Sushi account. With your permission, I will not select Edward Elgar from this list. I will close it now. And I'm going to show you a nice functionality for the autocomplete. So I'm going to click 3-digit, add 3 characters, sorry, Edward. And I see that Alma helped me find the right vendor. Now let's take a look to see what happens when I click and choose this. Alma already populates the vendor URL. This is perfect. Now, the next question that you may ask me is, why is the vendor URL populated in the grayed out field? The reason for this is that this URL is, I would say, controlled by the certified sushi vendor list. So if we get a complaint from one of our customers that the harvesting from Edward Elgar is not successful, either us or the institution will communicate with Edward Elgar and they will say, listen, the harvesting is not working. So one response that Edward Elgar may say that, yes, we have modified the URL. So for the institution to add the modified URL without creating a new Sushi account, we've added an override URL field for the institution to populate the new URL. But if you as an institution encounter with this, you can report it to Ex Libris, or if Ex Libris finds it before you as an institution, we will modify the certified sushi vendor list, and in your sushi account, this URL will be modified automatically. These are the advantages of using a certified sushi vendor. Because the vendor URL is updated as needed, either by Ex Libris or when the institution notified Ex Libris that the URL of the vendor was modified. I'm looking at the chat and I'm seeing that there are some questions. Let me see if there's something relevant for the configuration. What is the harvesting success rate for counter 5 current list? In the past, we encountered reports that were successful, but were actually empty. Are all counter reports supported are available? So this is a good question. Essentially, all of the counter 5 reports are supported, excluding the multimedia IR reports, which are currently undergoing development. And my assumption is by the end of 2020, we'll have a full support of the entire arch of reports for counter release 5, including the multimedia. How can I tell which product hosted the current platform? So essentially, you need to communicate with your vendor or with your collection provider to understand whether they support sushi harvesting, and if they do, you'll need to understand the credentials needed in order to configure a successful sushi account. Let's see another question. What is the consequence of having a sushi account credentials compromised? Lacking the usage data is the only impact? Well, I don't understand the word compromise, but essentially, if the credentials are incorrect, a sushi harvesting will not be successful. And as we'll see in further down the road in this presentation, you'll have in the specific screen of monitoring, you'll get an indication that the specific report or the specific platform was not successfully harvested in the specific month. So you will have the option to review it, understand from which platform you have an issue with the connection, and from there you can either communicate with the vendor or Ex Libris, depending on the specific issue, and this will be resolved, and the harvesting will be done, will be hopefully completed successfully. With your permission, I'm going to continue, and then I'm going to go over the next questions. So we have the vendor URL configured. The next thing that we'll need to do is essentially go to the request details. These are the details which are sent to the vendor to open the door and get the usage data. So I know that I spoke with Edward Elgar, and I know that Edward Elgar requires only a customer ID, which is 26. Okay. And I also know that Edward requires an API key. I hope I placed the API key. Looking at the Sushi account, I know that they had a special instruction that I need to also place a platform parameter. With your permission, I'll ignore it, I'll forget it. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do a test connection. Normally, just to be on the safe side, I save the Sushi account and then edit it again, just to make sure that Alma remembers the details. But for now, I'm going to test the connection without saving, and let's see what happens. So I'm testing the connection, and I see down below that something happened, something was downloaded. I'm going to take a look at the folder for my downloaded. Oh, I see it was not downloaded yet. Give me 1 second. Sorry. Show in folder. Perfect. I'm going to open it in my Notepad++, and I'm going to do Control-Shift-Alt-M. What I see now is a message: insufficient information to process the request. Fatal. platform name is missing or invalid. Okay, I forgot to place the platform. Thank you, dear vendor, for letting me know. The reason that I showed it is that Alma knows to handle specific codes which are sent from the vendor. Now the vendor sent me a code which Alma interpreted as a platform parameter is missing code. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to take the platform code which I've seen either in Alma's online help page or got from the vendor when I communicated with the vendor, and I'm going to place this code in the relevant field. I'm going to do again a test connection. Let's see what happens now. I got the JSON response from the vendor. What I'm going to do now is going to see this response in my Notepad++. I'm going to make it look a bit more attractive. And I see that the service active, it's good. We got counter user report for Sheridan, which is the platform that we wanted to get the usage. Perfect. Now I'm fully confident that my credentials, which I entered in the request details, are correct. They gave me the permission to go to the vendor website. This I know because the URL was correct. My customer ID and API key were correct, since I know the vendor told me that I'm missing the platform parameter. When I placed the platform parameter, the vendor was happy. The vendor told me that the connection is successful. The next thing that I need to do, or the last thing I need to do in order to fully configure the Sushi account, is to add report types. As stated, Alma provides you the option to configure multiple report types. For our example, with your permission, I'm going to add 2 report types, PRP1 and PR, I think will be the next suggestion. Good. As you can see, and I'm going to show it, there are multiple report types. As stated, Alma supports the entire arch of report types, excluding the multimedia, which will be supported by the end of 2020, I hope, or I expect. Okay, so we configured 2 report types. I know that the vendor supports these 2 report types. When you speak to the vendor, you need to make an inquiry and ask the vendor what are the reports type that the vendor is supporting, so you'll know to configure it in your Sushi account. What I'm going to do now, just to be on the safe side, is I'm going to save the Sushi account. We're going to see now that we have a Sushi account added. We see that it's active. We'll see that they have 2 report types for counter release 5. For the uploaded files, we see that it's blank due to the fact that we did not yet did the full harvesting or even test connection with response. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to the Sushi account for a second and show you that in addition to the, with your permission, give me 1 second. In addition to the test connection, which goes to the vendor and sees that everything is configured as expected in the request details, we have the option for each report type to do a test connection with response, meaning that not only will test the connection with the vendor, we'll get back a response which is relevant for this specific report type. We get a usage for this specific report type. Let's click on the test connection with response and see what happens. Let's see what we are getting back from the vendor when we do the test connection with response. So we got a JSON file from the vendor. I'm going to show it in the downloaded file. I'm going to open it with Notepad++. And I'm going to make sure that it appears. First of all, I see that something's happened. I see that I have data. This is great. What I also see is that the platform is Edward online. I see that the metric type for search as platform has 37, unique title requests 130. I see that I have counts here, which is perfect since I'm not only connecting with the vendor, I also get a response, the needed usage data for this specific report type. This is good. Now I know that everything is working as expected, and Alma knows to communicate with the vendor. Alma knows to get the usage data. Now what I need to do is to understand or decide whether I want to continue doing it manually, which I would not recommend you to do so, or I'll need to configure an automated process in order for Alma to do this harvesting automatically and essentially get the information from the vendor automatically without the institution need to go to either the vendor website or go to the vendor account and do the harvesting manually. So I'm going to save the Sushi account again, show you a small option to do harvest now from the Sushi account. If we'll do the harvest now, you know what, let's trigger the harvest now for a second. This process may take a few seconds, so I'm going to do the harvest now. I see that the job was triggered to go to the vendor website and retrieve the information from the defined report types. I'm going to let the job run for a second. What I would like to show you is an option to do the harvest now as we did just now, or configure Alma to do this harvesting automatically. Let's for a second save the vendor. We're going to leave Edward Elgar vendor on a side for a second and go to Alma's configuration. Now this is a new interface. Forgive me if I won't find the link easily. What I will look now is for acquisitions job configuration. When I'll click on the acquisition job configuration, I see that I have a dedicated section for sushi harvesting job. What I understand looking at this is that this job is currently inactive, meaning that this job will not run automatically. And for a successful harvesting, what I will need to do is the same thing that I did just now. Go to the vendor account and click harvest now. Another option that I have is to click run now. If I'll click run now, Alma will go to all the vendors which have a sushi account configured in their vendor details page, and will do the harvesting for the usage data. If I would not like to do it manually as recommended, we can do a automated harvesting process. We'll turn the status to active and we'll choose whether or not we would like the scheduled job not to run, whether we would like it to run weekly, and this is something that was available always in Alma, and something that was added recently due to comments that we received from the community is the option to run the job on a weekly basis. Why is this option, or was this option added? We've heard from our institutions that when the job ran weekly, some vendors did not have the reports ready yet, and this resulted as failure for some institutions in the harvesting process. So what we did in order to have I would say successful harvesting process, we provided institution the option to choose when they would like the harvesting process to be done in order to hopefully retrieve information as successfully as possible. We added some more enhancements to the sushi harvesting functionality, but I'm not going to show it now. I'm going to show it in the presentation. I have 5 more minutes before I'll turn the key to Yoel, but what I want to show you is the job that we just ran. So I'll go over to Alma screen to see what happened to the harvesting process. I'm going to go over, to admin. I'm going to go to monitor jobs. Hopefully I will not see it in the running. I'll go to the history and I'll see that the sushi harvesting ran. I see it was completed successfully. Going to the report, I can see also that we have the reports harvested, which is great. I can go to a specific report and view the records which were essentially harvested. What I can do, same thing as I did for the vendor, I can download the JSON report, and I'm going to do it now just to show you. I can download the JSON report, which was harvested from the vendor, just to make sure that the usage data actually was downloaded successfully. I'm going to show it in my folder, show it in Notepad++. Let's see. And what I see now is that I have all the usage for this specific report type. Another entry point for me, besides the job report, is to go to the vendor itself, which I'm going to do now. I'm going to try looking for Edward. I'm going to search for it. I'm going to go to edit the vendor account and to the usage data tab. And what I'm going to see that in addition to the sushi account, which we just configured, we're going to see that we have a successful harvesting for the report type, which we configure. The question is, why do we see 4 rows here? The reason that we see 4 rows here is because this sushi account was never harvested before. When Alma goes to fetch the report types, Alma goes to the vendor and tries to search for 12 months back, to search usage data 12 months back. So what we have here is for PR, we have successful harvesting for 2020 and for 2019. For PRP1, we have the reports for 2020 and for 2019, meaning 12 months back. So Alma knows to identify if the reports were available previously. If they were available previously, Alma will only go to the vendor website and fetch the relevant reports for this specific month. If this is a newly configured account, Alma will go and try to fetch 12 months back. Side note, we have an idea exchange to provide institution with the option to determine the time period which they would like to be harvested. We are analyzing it now positively, I must say, and we will communicate with you our development when we continue down the road. Let me go back to the presentation, see if I missed anything, and then I'll go to the questions and continue from there. Let's see, one second, I want to see that I'm on the right slide. Okay. Okay, I'll present now. So we went over this user interface. We saw that we configure R4 and R5. We've seen the user interface as well. We configured the correlevant. We saw the test connection, which is important. We know that we are connected. We configured the report types. We did the test connection with response to see that we're not only connected to the vendor, we also got a response from the vendor. We saw that the response contains the metric types, which is perfect. We've seen that the single Sushi account can contain multiple report types. We've seen the option to have manual harvesting for the entire Sushi account. We also went over to the scheduling and monitoring to see that we can configure the job to run automatically, which is recommended. We went over to the job to see that we can review whatever was harvested. And I think that the last thing that I want us to see, and continue doing it, is the monitoring. I'm not going to show it live due to the fact that I'm already, I think, over my time. But in Alma, there's an option to go to acquisition load usage data. We have two tabs within the load usage data screen. First thing is the uploaded files tab, which essentially showed us the reports which were harvested, similar to what we've seen on the specific Sushi account. We have the option to see an aggregated list of all the reports type which were harvested from all the vendors. We have an indication on which vendor the harvesting was done from, the reports and the status, whether it was fully processed, partially processed, or not processed at all. Additionally, another enhancement which was done in one of Alma's recent releases is the monthly usage data tab. On top of performance improvements, we added a very clear indication whether the harvesting was done successfully from the specific platform or if the harvesting was not done successfully. Now, when harvesting is not done successfully, there can be two reasons. The first reason is that the vendor did not have the usage data ready, meaning that a successful connection to the vendor was done, but the data was not yet available. So you'll get an indication that no usage data was available. Another icon that can potentially appear here, but you cannot see it now, is a red icon that states that we tried to connect to the vendor, but we did not manage to connect with the vendor. So if you see a red icon, you need to know that the issue, I would say, was on your side. But if you see a yellow icon, you need to understand that the data was not yet ready on the vendor side. I think that this is everything that I had to show. With your permission, I'm going to go over to the chat, and then I'm going to pass the wand to Yoel. Let's see what I have here. The change of URL needs to go to Alma T2 or to someone specific. So this is a good question. Let me just see. I think I missed it. 1 second. Make it bigger. Oh, I see we have a lot of questions. So Yoel, with your permission, is it okay if I'll pass the one to you? I'll go over the questions. I'll prepare my answers, and you leave me like 2 minutes. Yeah,
sure,
good. Thank you, Yoel.
I'll come back to you in 5 minutes. Just right quickly and make the presenter, please.
Okay, so let's see if I can do it. I'm going to first of all stop sharing my screen. And then I'm going to go to did you get the privilege to share?
No, you need to right click me, please, and make the presenter.
Okay, give me 1 second. So I'm going to right click you in the panelists.
Yeah.
So let's see if I'll find it. Sorry, it's new for me. Is it within the chat, Yoel?
No, under the participants.
Sorry, participants. See, I'm not sure. Cross participants. Okay, now I see Yoel. I'm seeing right click and I'm going to give you privileges. Share. Yoel, I think I gave you the privileges. Let me know if you got it.
Okay. Make me the presenter, please.
Mm-hmm. I passed the one to you, Yoel.
Great, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Okay, so I've got my screen shared here. Before we begin, I'd like to point out, we're discussing now counter report usage in Alma Analytics. Everything Noam showed up until now was the loading of the counter reports via Sushi. The counter reports, of course, can also be loaded manually. After they're loaded, what do we do with them? It's not just academic, intellectual exercise of how can we load these reports to Alma. We want to actually do something with them. So what I'm showing now is the contents of this counter report usage in Alma Analytics. I'm going to send to everybody right now the link. This is under Alma training, extended training, presentations and documents for analytics and cost usage. I'm going to go into the chat and send everybody that link so everybody's got it. And very briefly, we'll look at the presentation, but most of what we're going to do will be in Alma. So there are two places where, I couldn't open it, that's interesting. There are two places in analytics where the counter usage resides, where you can make a report on the counter usage. So let's go take a look at those two places. So I'm going to go from analytics, design analytics, and I'm in analytics. There's two subject areas in the analytics where you can view, oh, I've got too many things over here, where you can view the usage data. One of them, I'm going to say create analysis. One of those places is the usage data subject area. The other place is the e-inventory subject area. What is the difference between the two places? And this, I want to make sure is 100% clear to everybody, so stop me if it's not. The counter data that Noam has showed until now is present in the e-inventory subject area and the usage data subject area. The usage data subject area includes everything that was ever loaded via a counter report. The e-inventory subject area is everything that was ever loaded via a counter report and also exists in Alma. What do I mean? There may be cases where a counter report contains a resource, studies in library science, widely online. Just as an example, I'm making something up. It might be that the institution is receiving that from a vendor in a counter report, but it doesn't actually exist in Alma. It happens very often. For whatever reason, the institution didn't activate it. They ordered it, but if they didn't activate it, which is not a good situation, but it happens, or the vendor is putting everything that was from a certain collection that the institution ordered in the counter report, and the community zone is now updating, or the institution didn't update from the community zone, didn't activate the collection to automatically add the new titles. It could be various reasons. So that's the difference between the e-inventory and the usage data. I'm going to show an example here. So I'm in Alma Analytics, and I have examples ready here that I want to show that are going to illustrate the situation of the counter reports where they might be. Okay, so I'm going to say create an analysis. Oh, first, hold on. I'm going to take a look at this one. This is release 5 titles for ProQuest eBook Central usage data. And I'm looking in the e-inventory subject area. Let's take a look. I first want to look at the criteria tab. Here, I'm in the e-inventory subject area, as everybody sees, and I'm getting the fiscal period from 2019 June to 2020 May. For platform ProQuest eBook Central, and I just want to get a certain amount of titles at the beginning, so I said title starts with A. But I'm getting release 5, and because these are release 5 measures, TRB1, and I'm getting the usage on it. But the main thing is I'm getting titles from ProQuest eBook Central. Then I'm opening another tab just so I can simultaneously show what I want to show. Then here, we'll open another one in the usage data subject area. Same thing, but the usage data subject area. Edit. And again, we'll go to the criteria tab. Switching to the criteria tab. Okay, so again, I'm getting the usage date is between these 2 years, this period. And the platform is ProQuest eBook Central. Title begins with A. I just want a very small amount. I even limited it even more, usage date years. So just to show the difference. So now I'm in the usage data. Usage data, we said, will have more or equal than the e-inventory subject area. Because there's a match in the e-inventory subject area. It would take, just as an example, a companion to Euripides, and here it will show every title that was ever an accounting report. In the e-inventory subject area, it will only show those which were an accounting report and also in Alma. For example, I'm going to come back to the PowerPoint for a moment. For example, we have a brief, in the usage data, we have a brief history of the late Ottoman Empire, a case for climate engineering, and a companion to cultural memory studies. Again, here, climate engineering, a companion to cultural memory studies, and a brief history of the Latin Ottoman Empire. We've got these 3. A companion to cultural memory, if I come here in the e-inventory subject area, I don't have a companion to cultural memory. I have a brief history of the late Ottoman Empire, of a place for climate changing, which are also in the usage data, but here in the e-inventory, I do not have a companion to cultural memory studies. And the reason I don't have a companion to cultural memory studies is because in the institution, that title does not exist. The title is an accounting report, so therefore, it doesn't exist. It's in accounting report, therefore it's in the usage data subject area, but it's not in the e-inventory subject area, because here we have only what also exists in Alma, which is a logical thing to do, because here in the e-inventory subject area, we don't just get the counter usage, we also get the cost usage, we have the funds, the ledgers, the purchase order lines, a lot more than just pure usage. So that's the first important step. Where do these two, in what areas does the counter usage reside in analytics? I'm going to stop for a moment and make sure what I just stated now is clear. Is that clear to everybody? Is there any questions or comments regarding the e-inventory subject area as opposed to the usage data subject area? Yes, all clear. Great. Thank you for letting me know. Okay. Now, we also have default reports and dashboards. I'm going to go to the catalog right now. Leave the page. Okay. So, under shared folders, as you know, we have an Alma directory. Alma is the directory where the default reports and dashboards are present. It's a read-only folder. And if somebody wants to take a report from here and edit it, he or she can copy it to his institutional folder and do it there. So we have here cost per use via counter reports and inventory and acquisition data. Now, it's a long name for a folder because we wanted to be 100% clear so everyone would understand what we're talking about. Because we also have them going to the next folder, cost per use via fulfillment data, which is something else entirely. And then we have usage. We have usage via counter reports and usage via counter reports release 5. We'll talk about that in a moment. So here I am in the cost per use. Now, the cost per use is from the e-inventory subject area and actually shows both usage and cost per use because we already saw that the counter usage reports are in the e-inventory subject area. So here we have, for example, the most used titles. Someone can look at this only according to what is the most used without any relationship to cost. However, we also have the cost per use here because we have the usage from the counter reports, we have the cost from the purchase order lines, and then we have the cost per use. By the way, if anybody is interested, which I'm sure there are people who are, there's a lot of blogs and explanations about the cost per use on the Developers Network. I went to developersexlibris.com, and if I go to our blog here and just write, for example, cost per use, so there's a lot here, how the cost per use is calculated in all different kinds of situations. There's a tag here, cost per use, which I'll get. So all of this is how the cost per use is done, and we're not going to explain it now, but how do we take a title, match it to a purchase order line, and then determine what was the cost? Getting the use, a little more straightforward, but this is how we get the cost. So everybody is invited to look here as well. So we're looking at now, I'm going back to Alma right now. I'm going to make this a little smaller so I can get the top of this. Okay. So this is the most used titles. Then those titles are divided. We have here one for continuous being typically a journal. So these are all the journals with portfolio, the continuous resources with a creation date greater than a year ago. It defaults to 1 year ago. I could have put in here a filter, the cost is greater than, usage is greater than, etc. And this is just a breakdown title by title. Same with the one time, which is typically an ebook, but not always. Then we get a breakdown, for example, by platforms to see from which platforms is the use the highest and how much does it cost. Because it might be that there's a platform which is very well used, but also might be very expensive. In this case, ProQuest, the first one is very well used and relatively inexpensive compared to the others. So that's enough to say about the cost per use dashboard, and that's fully explained here in the PowerPoint. There's a whole explanation of all of the default reports and dashboards, each of them, and then an explanation. It goes tab by tab, explaining exactly what they are. This is when we just looked at the platforms, so you're all invited to look here. Let me just pop over to the other default dashboard, which is for usage, for pure usage. And there's actually two dashboards in there. If I go to usage via counter reports, now this is divided between release 5 and just not release 5. Eventually, we're assuming that it's all going to be release 5. That's the ultimate goal, not of Ex Libris, but of the world. The NISO and the official counter organization, everything is supposed to be moving over to release 5. I think it's already the majority. So here we've got dashboards. Now, one of these dashboards, I'm going to show monthly usage data. This is parallel to Noam showed during his session that you can go into acquisitions and into import and view the what was loaded and what wasn't loaded. What we're looking at here, let it load for a moment. We can also see via the analytics what was loaded and what wasn't loaded. For example, here's a nice example. Allen Press Pinnacle. These are, the red ones were not loaded yet. Now, I've got this on 2020, so of course from August on it's not been loaded yet. They don't have usage statistics yet for August, but I can see here that April was loaded. January, February, April to the rest was loaded, but the one that's missing is March. So immediately the institution sees, also here I see March is missing. So the institution can quickly and easily see here what has been loaded and what's been missing. This is parallel to what Noam showed in the load usage data. Then we've also got a pure usage dashboard, usage via counter reports. And this one doesn't relate at all to the cost per use. It relates to pure usage. And again, here in the usage, let me just change these defaults for the place I happen to be located at. I'm going to say here, give me all column values. Okay, I'll leave that at 2019. Apply. So here, for example, I'm getting the most used titles. I'll change this to 2020. Thank you for letting me know that. Okay. Right, because if I'm in release 5, it's primarily going to be 2020. There we go. Okay, most used platforms. Again, this is pure usage straight from the counter reports with nothing related specifically to cost. Because here we don't have the cost. We're only taking it from the counter reports. Okay, that brings us already till 9 o'clock. And like I say in every meeting, we got to start making these an hour and a half. We thank everybody for joining. I'm sorry if there's still questions or comments. 9 o'clock, people have other meetings to attend now. So if you do have more questions, send them in to Noam, and we can field them that way. And we'll be, as always, posting this recording. Noam, is there any final words you want to add before we stop sharing and stop the recording?
Perfect, Yoel. Thank you very much.
Okay, so thanks everybody for joining and have a nice day.